There are two dungeon themes from The Legend of Zelda that I consider to be pretty much perfect. The first is the Forest Temple theme from Ocarina of Time. It's eerie and atmospheric, with unsettling vocal chants and lush sweeping chords that make the player feel completely lost. But it's the other perfect dungeon theme I want to talk about today. A darker and more oppressive one. The theme from Link's Awakening's 6th dungeon, Face Shrine. Anyone who's played Link's Awakening will remember the moment they first heard this piece of music. It makes you stop in your tracks. You're hit with a wall of emotions. Stop, turn back, you shouldn't be here. So in this video, I want to break down my favourite dungeon theme, Face Shrine. We'll talk about how it was written back in the 90s, why it sounds so powerful and intense, and how it was rearranged over 25 years later to sound even better. This video contains no major plot spoilers for Link's Awakening, but I will be lightly touching upon some of the game's themes. And with that out of the way, let's dissect Zelda's best dungeon theme. Part 1. A new kind of Zelda. The year was 1991, and Nintendo had just wrapped up work on The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Finally, the developers had some free time on their hands, and for programmer Kazuaki Morita, this was an opportunity to try making a game for the Game Boy. I wanted to learn how to program for the Game Boy and did a lot of experiments, he said. Morita set himself the challenge of bringing A Link to the Past, the game he'd just been working on, to the Game Boy. That's no small challenge, and as months went by, more and more Nintendo developers joined in on this project, and the team's ambitions grew. According to Takashi Tezuka, who ended up directing the game, we'd do our regular work during normal work hours, and then work on it sort of like an after-school club activity. Before long, the team changed plans. Rather than porting A Link to the Past, they decided to create a fully original Zelda game just for the Game Boy. With that, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening had been born. This game would be weird. Tezuka told the team to exclude Zelda staples like the Triforce, the Kingdom of Hyrule, and even the titular Princess Zelda, and the music too would be a break from the norm. The soundtracks of both the original Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past had been composed by game music legend Koji Kondo. But with Kondo busy, Link's Awakening had 3 musicians, all brand new to the Zelda series. First was Kazumi Totaka, whose role on the game was largely sound programming. Second was Kozue Ishikawa, who wrote the nostalgic Mabe Village theme, as well as Tao Tao Heights, an energetic theme which has become a real fan favourite. But it's the third composer, Minako Hamano, whose music left the biggest impact on Link's Awakening. Not only did she write the Ballad of the Windfish, the game's theme song, she also composed all 8 dungeon themes. If you listen to all of Link's Awakening's dungeon themes back to back, you might notice something interesting. There's a shared melody, a short motif, which appears in all of them. I'll show you what I mean. That is the cave melody from Link's Awakening. And now, take a listen to the music of Tail Cave, the game's first dungeon. It's that same melody, and here it is in the music from the second dungeon, the third, and fourth dungeons. Hamano made sure to give each dungeon its own unique vibe, of course, but by repeating the cave theme, twisting it and evolving it each time, it feels like all the dungeons are connected, like you're journeying deeper and deeper into Koholint Island. But then, halfway through the game, something changes. The familiar melody disappears, replaced with something new. Part 2. Face Shrine. You're listening to the theme of Face Shrine, Link's Awakening's 6th dungeon. This theme is haunting, unsettling. It gives the dungeon a totally unique vibe, and is, to me, the most memorable dungeon theme from the Zelda series. Yes, it is simple. The whole track is built around a simple, repeated arpeggio. But the chords used here, the way they shift and change, the unrelenting pace, all of that adds up to make this beautiful and yet chilling piece of music. So, let's move over to the piano to discuss a little about how the Face Shrine theme works. First off, an arpeggio is just a chord where each note is played one after the other, rather than at the same time. In the theme for Face Shrine, composer Minako Hamano uses these arpeggios to outline a dark, somewhat unsettling pattern of chords. With each chord change, only a couple of notes actually change. The result is that rather than sounding like a pop song with big dramatic jumps from chord to chord, the Face Shrine theme instead gently shifts and warps as you listen. There's something about this piece of music that reminds me of certain Baroque classical compositions, like those of Bach. One of Bach's most famous works is Prelude in C major, which uses a similar technique to the Face Shrine theme. Using repeated arpeggios, each chord is outlined, and then just a couple of notes are changed each time, so that the chords seem to subtly shift. There's no melody on top, the repeated arpeggios are the focus of the music. The key difference? Prelude in C major is, at least largely, built around a major key, so the piece sounds uplifting and beautiful. Face Shrine, on the other hand, is in the key of C minor, so it ends up sounding a lot darker. And that dark sound ties in very intentionally with the point in which this theme is heard in Link's Awakening. You hear Face Shrine's theme twice during the game, once in the dungeon itself, and once beforehand. You see, before entering the main Face Shrine dungeon, the player visits a small temple called the Southern Face Shrine. Without going into detail about Link's Awakening's story, it's in Southern Face Shrine that the player learns that Koholint Island is not quite what it seems, that the island hides a dark secret. And while we learn this truth, we hear a slower variation of the Face Shrine theme, complete with an additional somber melody line. Then, shortly afterwards, we enter the main Face Shrine dungeon, and while the player wonders if what they're doing is for the best, if their quest is really a noble one, the full Face Shrine theme plays out. I think part of why I've always found Face Shrine to be so memorable is not the music alone, but the combination of this dark, oppressive theme with such a pivotal moment in the game's story. Not only is the Face Shrine theme memorable, it also underscores a really key moment in Link's adventure on Koholint Island. But then, over 25 years after Minako Hamano wrote this theme, a new composer came along and put their own spin on it. And it's this new version that I consider to be the perfect Zelda dungeon theme. Part 3. A New Twist. For longtime Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma, the idea of remaking Link's Awakening for modern consoles felt like an obvious one. But he didn't want to do it unless he could think of some new idea, some kind of twist to make the game feel interesting, even to those who'd played the original title. I want it to be a fresh experience, so I was looking for that opportunity, he said. And so, the idea of a Link's Awakening remake remained on the back burner for a number of years. Enter Super Mario Maker. The idea of letting players create their own Mario levels feels obvious in retrospect, but at the time, it really was a revolutionary step forward for the series. And with the game going on to become a breakout success for the Wii U, the obvious question was, what about Zelda? Inside Nintendo, Aonuma was trying to figure out how a Zelda maker could work. Designing whole entire dungeons might be too complicated for general audiences, he thought, and so Aonuma set his sights smaller. What if the player could arrange dungeon rooms instead? In Link's Awakening, pretty much every room is about the same size, so we thought this would be a perfect fit for incorporating the chamber dungeons, and that's how Link's Awakening Remake came about. To match the original game's origin on the Game Boy, the team opted for a miniature toy-like aesthetic. Everything from the houses to the trees to Link himself looked like clay figurines in a tiny world. It was an unconventional look for Zelda, and that called for an unconventional soundtrack too. Enter Ryo Nagamatsu. Nagamatsu is a composer who joined Nintendo in 2006. He'd previously been in charge of the music for A Link Between Worlds, much of which consisted of new arrangements of SNES themes. In other words, he had some experience taking old Zelda tunes and giving them a fresh coat of paint. The soundtrack from A Link Between Worlds is almost all orchestral, brass, strings, and woodwinds. The game didn't use real orchestra recordings, mind you, but the final result still sounds big and bombastic. But for Link's Awakening's miniature world, a large-scale sound could totally overwhelm the rest of the presentation. Nagamatsu explained, "Since a large orchestra wouldn't really fit the visuals of this title, I kept it to a small one this time. At the same time, we still needed music with oomph for a Legend of Zelda game." And thus, for the most part, Nagamatsu used small groups of woodwind instruments, like in the title theme. Or just a handful of strings, like in the overworld. But every rule has an exception, and that brings us to Face Shrine. The moment you step through the entrance, you're hit with a wall of lush, thick-sounding strings. The chords suggested by the original arpeggios are explicitly outlined here and built upon with more complex harmonies. There's more movement within the chords themselves. The strings were recorded live in studio by a group called the Yu Manabe Strings, and the final result sounds luscious and exquisite. But just about halfway through the piece, there's a big surprise. The original Game Boy chiptune tones of Face Shrine gently fade in. According to Nagamatsu himself, there are many pieces of music where, for some parts, we used the original audio source. Try listening carefully for these parts of the music if you've already played the original game. For someone like me, for whom the original Link's Awakening soundtrack is beloved, hearing those Game Boy tones was like being hit with a wave of nostalgia. And for new players, the retro sounds serve as a link to the past. So, in my opinion, Link's Awakening features some of the very best musical arranging from any Zelda game. Balancing the nostalgic, classic sound with a modernized feel is really not easy to do, but Ryo Nagamatsu makes it look easy. It is, therefore, a real shame, I think, that Nagamatsu left Nintendo in 2023. The game's follow-up, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, carries on a lot of Nagamatsu's ideas from Link's Awakening, but with a fresh group of composers at the helm. And from the Game Boy original, Kozue Ishikawa is also no longer working at Nintendo. Only Minako Hamano, who now works on the Metroid series, and Kazumi Totaka of Animal Crossing remain at the company. But together, these 4 composers, across the span of 2 generations and 26 years, helped shape one of the most memorable soundtracks in the Zelda series. And at the core of that soundtrack lies the Face Shrine theme, a piece of music that no one who plays the game will forget. Hey, thanks so much for watching. As always, videos like this are made possible thanks to the kind support of my patrons, including Arthur Nicole, Brett Prophet, Cyprian Eov, Daryl Jero, Doran, Fresh Poetic, Jim Gilsonan, Kieran Chan, Kinugu, Lucas Little, May I, Michael Gunter, Robin Stick, Skatorpie, and Thomas Söderlund.